My name is Ruth, and I'm 58 years old. Today I paid for my daughter Amanda's dream wedding, a stunning $60,000 affair for 200 guests. Despite our strained relationship, I hoped this gesture would finally bridge the gap between us. I never expected she would use her speech to publicly mock my simple life and career choices. I maintained my dignity with a smile, but then something extraordinary happened when the groom's boss heard my name and requested the microphone. If you're watching this, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're viewing from. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. The story of my complicated relationship with my daughter Amanda begins long before her wedding day. 20 years ago, when Amanda was just 8 years old, my husband Thomas decided family life wasn't exciting enough for him. He packed his bags, emptied our joint bank account, and disappeared with his young secretary to start a new life in California. I was left alone to raise our daughter with nothing but my teaching salary and a mountain of debt Thomas had secretly accumulated. Those early years were incredibly difficult. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Mornings at the local high school teaching English literature, evenings waiting tables at Frankie's Diner, and weekends doing administrative work for a small law firm. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. Despite the exhaustion, I made sure Amanda never felt the full weight of our financial struggles. I sewed her clothes when I couldn't afford store-bought ones, packed her lunches with little notes of encouragement, and never missed a school event, even if it meant going straight from one job to another, without rest. As a single parent, I tried to compensate for her father's absence by being both mother and father. I learned to throw a baseball, built her science fair projects, and stayed up late helping with homework. My life revolved entirely around giving Amanda every opportunity I could afford. Things were manageable when she was younger. She seemed to understand our situation, and even showed appreciation for the sacrifices I made. I remember how proud she was to tell her 3rd grade class that her mum was a teacher who helped students learn about great books and writers. Back then, she would beam with pride when introducing me to her friends. Everything changed when Amanda entered middle school. Suddenly, my simple Honda became embarrassing compared to the luxury cars other parents drove. Our modest 2-bedroom apartment in a decent but certainly not affluent neighborhood made her reluctant to invite friends over. The clothes I could afford were never the right brands. "Mum, why can't we live in a real house like Jessica's family?" she would ask. "Their mum doesn't even work, and they have a pool and 3 bathrooms." I tried explaining our circumstances without burdening her with adult worries. "We have everything we need, sweetie. Maybe not everything we want, but we're doing just fine." But Amanda grew increasingly embarrassed by our lifestyle. When career day came around in 8th grade, she begged me not to mention my second job at the diner. "Just tell everyone you're a teacher and that's it," she insisted. "None of the other parents have to work in restaurants." I honored her wish, swallowing the hurt I felt at having to hide part of what kept us afloat. After all, wasn't that what being a mother was about? Putting your child's feelings before your own. High school only widened the gap between us. Amanda was naturally intelligent and beautiful qualities that helped her climb the social ladder at school. She began spending time with children from wealthy families, kids with trust funds and vacation homes. The more she integrated into their world, the more she distanced herself from ours. When she was 16, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. "No, you can't pick me up at my place," she was saying. "It's so embarrassing. Let's just meet at the mall." Each word felt like a knife to my heart. Despite working multiple jobs, I had managed to save enough for Amanda's college fund. It wasn't enough for 4 years at an elite school, but combined with scholarships, it could give her options. Amanda had her heart set on Westfield University, a prestigious private college known for its business program and wealthy alumni network. When she received her acceptance letter, along with a partial scholarship, I was ecstatic. This was what all the sacrifices had been for. I took on additional tutoring hours to help cover the remaining tuition costs, determined that my daughter would have the opportunities I never had. College transformed Amanda in ways I hadn't anticipated. Her occasional calls home became increasingly rare and perfunctory. When she did call, it was usually because she needed money for books, sorority dues, or spring break trips that were absolutely essential for networking. I dipped into my retirement savings more than once to ensure she wouldn't miss out. During her sophomore year, Amanda came home for Thanksgiving with a new wardrobe, a sophisticated haircut, and what seemed like a completely new personality. She spoke about professors and classmates whose names I didn't recognize, using terminology from her business classes that felt deliberately exclusionary. "You wouldn't understand, Mum," became her standard response whenever I asked about her studies or friends. When I mentioned a former student of mine who had recently been accepted to Westfield for graduate studies, Amanda quickly changed the subject. I later discovered she had told her college friends that her mother was a successful publisher who worked from home. The waitressing and tutoring jobs that had funded her education had been completely erased from her narrative. Despite the growing distance, I continued to hope our relationship would improve once she established herself. Perhaps when she no longer felt the insecurity of striving for social acceptance, she would appreciate the foundation that had gotten her there. Then came Jack. Amanda called one evening during her senior year, uncharacteristically excited to tell me about the amazing guy she'd been dating for 3 months. Jack Harrington came from a good family with connections in the financial industry, where he had already secured a position upon graduation. "His parents have a summer home in the Hamptons, Mom," she gushed, "and they've invited me to stay for 2 weeks after graduation." I was happy she had found someone special, but couldn't help noticing she had waited 3 months to mention him. When I asked if I might meet Jack soon, there was a telling pause. "Of course, eventually," she said. "It's just that his family is very particular about who Jack gets serious with. They have expectations, you know." I knew then that Amanda was ashamed to introduce me to her boyfriend and his family. The knowledge stung, but I smiled through the phone and told her I was looking forward to meeting him whenever she was ready. When that meeting finally happened 6 months later, it was brief and clearly orchestrated by Amanda to minimize my interaction with Jack. She barely mentioned my career. And when Jack asked direct questions about what I did for a living, Amanda quickly interjected with vague references to my work in education before steering the conversation elsewhere. Throughout the dinner, I noticed how she flinched whenever my grammar wasn't perfect, or when I used simpler vocabulary rather than more sophisticated terms. I continued to love my daughter unconditionally, even as she seemed determined to erase the parts of her life that included me. Every dismissive comment and embarrassed glance hurt deeply, but I reminded myself that she was young and still finding her way. I held on to hope that maturity would eventually bring her back to me, that she would someday see the value in the life I had built for us, through sheer determination and love. 6 months after I met Jack, Amanda called with news of their engagement. Her excitement was palpable, but focused entirely on the ring, 3 carats, Mum, and Jack's recent promotion. There was no mention of love or partnership, just status and security. "We're thinking about a June wedding next year," she said. "Something elegant, but not too over the top. Jack's parents know the perfect venue in Connecticut." I noticed how she said, "Jack's parents know," rather than asking for my input. It was clear from the beginning that my role would be limited. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart. I'd love to help with the planning. Maybe we could look at dresses together." I suggested, trying to find some way to be involved. "Oh, I've already been looking with Stephanie," she replied, referring to one of her college friends. "And Jack's mum knows a fantastic wedding planner. But thanks for offering." Throughout the following weeks, I received only sporadic updates about wedding plans that were apparently proceeding without my input. Then came the call about finances. "Mum, we've worked out the budget for the wedding," Amanda said without preamble. "Your share comes to $60,000. The figure knocked the breath from my lungs. 60,000, Amanda, that's more than my annual salary. I know it's a lot, but Jack's parents are covering the rehearsal dinner and honeymoon. This is really the minimum for a decent wedding these days. If you can't manage it, I guess we could scale back, but it would be really embarrassing." The manipulation was clear, but what could I do? This was my only daughter's wedding. I had been saving for retirement, had finally paid off my mortgage after years of struggle, and had a modest emergency fund. All of that would need to be liquidated, and I would still need a loan to cover the full amount. "I'll figure it out, sweetie," I promised, already calculating which bank might offer the best terms for a personal loan. 2 weeks later, I was invited to meet Jack's family at their home in Greenwich. Unlike Amanda's descriptions, the Harrington residence wasn't ostentatiously wealthy. It was a lovely colonial home, well-maintained but not showy. Barbara and William Harrington were surprisingly down-to-earth people who immediately made me feel welcome. "Ruth, we're so pleased to finally meet you," Barbara said, taking my hands in hers. "Jack speaks very highly of Amanda, and we've been looking forward to getting to know her family." Throughout dinner, I found myself genuinely enjoying their company. William had worked his way up in investment banking but spoke fondly of his middle-class childhood in Pennsylvania. Barbara was involved in several charitable organizations and seemed sincerely interested in my teaching career. "Teachers are the unsung heroes," she said warmly. "Our society doesn't value education nearly enough." I noticed Amanda growing increasingly uncomfortable as the evening progressed, especially when William asked about my life as a single mother. "It must have been challenging raising such a wonderful daughter on your own," he said kindly. Before I could respond, Amanda interjected. "Mom doesn't like talking about those days. It was ages ago anyway." Barbara exchanged a glance with her husband that I couldn't quite interpret, but they smoothly moved the conversation forward. Later, as William showed me their garden, he quietly mentioned, "Just so you know, we've offered to help with the wedding costs, but Amanda insisted you wanted to handle your traditional portion." My heart sank at the deception, but I simply thanked him for the kind offer without correcting Amanda's lie. I didn't want to create additional tension before the wedding. I still harbored hope that the event might somehow bring Amanda and me closer, that seeing me fulfill my maternal duties might remind her of all we had shared. As the wedding approached, I received strict instructions about my role and appearance. The dress I had carefully selected for the occasion was deemed too teacher-like by Amanda during a tense shopping trip. "Mum, you can't wear something from a department store to my wedding," she insisted, steering me toward a boutique with price tags that made my stomach clench. "What about this one?" I suggested, pointing to a lovely blue dress that was still well beyond my normal budget, but at least seemed reasonable. "That's something a grandmother would wear," Amanda scoffed. "You need something more sophisticated." After 2 hours of increasingly uncomfortable selections, I ended up with a designer dress that cost $3,000. It wasn't a style I would have chosen for myself. It wasn't particularly flattering, but it met Amanda's standards. That apparently was all that mattered. With each passing week, Amanda's calls and texts increased in frequency but decreased in warmth. Every communication centered around additional expenses or last-minute demands. "Mum, we need to upgrade the floral arrangements. Can you transfer another $2,000 by tomorrow?" "The photographer we booked isn't available, so we found a better one. He's only $3,000 more." We decided on a live band instead of a DJ. It's just $4,000 extra, but it will make such a difference. I agreed to everything, transferring money I didn't have for details I wasn't allowed to help choose. By the time the wedding week arrived, I had depleted my savings, taken a loan against my home equity, and maxed out 2 credit cards. At 58, I was starting over financially, all for a single day that I wasn't even sure I would be welcome to fully participate in. Despite everything, I maintained my hope. This was still my daughter's wedding day, a milestone I had dreamed of sharing with her since she was small. Surely, when the moment came, the joy of the occasion would transcend our differences. I held on to that belief, even as evidence mounted to the contrary. The night before the wedding, I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner. Amanda explained it was just for the wedding party and very close family, a category I apparently didn't qualify for, despite being her only living parent. I spent the evening alone in my hotel room rehearsing my smile in the mirror, determined to show nothing but support on the following day, regardless of how I was treated. The morning of Amanda's wedding arrived with perfect June weather sunshine, filtering through cotton candy clouds in a brilliant blue sky. I woke early, my stomach fluttering with both hope and anxiety. Today would be a fresh start, I told myself. A new chapter for Amanda, and perhaps for our relationship too. I had arranged to arrive at the venue early, hoping to help with last-minute preparations, or simply share a quiet moment with my daughter before the whirlwind of the day swept her away. The Rosewood estate was even more impressive than the photos had suggested, a historic mansion set among manicured gardens with a crystal-clear lake in the background. The kind of venue that appeared in luxury wedding magazines, not in the modest dreams I'd once had for my daughter's special day. "I'm Ruth Miller, the mother of the bride," I told the coordinator who met me at the entrance. "I thought I might be able to help with anything that needs doing." The young woman consulted her tablet with a slight frown. "Oh, Ms. Miller, you're early." The bride specified that family should arrive no more than an hour before the ceremony. "I just thought I could help with the flowers or setting up place cards, anything Amanda might need." "Everything is being handled by our professional staff," she replied with practiced politeness. "But you're welcome to wait in the guest lounge until the wedding party is ready for family photos." I was directed to a small room off the main hall, where I sat alone for nearly 2 hours, hearing the distant sounds of laughter and activity, but participating in none of it. Eventually, a different coordinator appeared to escort me to the bridal suite for the scheduled family photographs. The suite was chaos when I entered, filled with Amanda's bridesmaids in matching silk robes, makeup artists, hairstylists, and photographers capturing every moment. Amanda sat in the center of it all, already in her wedding gown, a spectacular creation of lace and crystal that must have cost more than 6 months of my salary. "Mum, finally," she said, barely looking up from her phone. "We need to do the mother-daughter photos now before we fall behind schedule." There was no hug, no moment of maternal bonding that I had imagined so many times. Just a brisk, efficient photo session directed by a photographer who positioned us like mannequins. "Can you stand a little further back, Ms. Miller?" he suggested. "And maybe just put your hand lightly on her shoulder, not around her waist." I did as instructed, maintaining my smile, even as I felt the intentional distance being created in what should have been intimate family portraits. Amanda's bridesmaids, all friends from college, or her new social circle, barely acknowledged my presence. I caught snippets of their conversations about recent trips to Europe and summer plans in exclusive locations. When the photos were complete, Amanda turned to me with a quick, "Thanks, Mum. You should probably go find your seat now. It's in the 10th row on the left." "10th row?" I repeated, confused. "But I'm the mother of the bride." We had to make some adjustments to accommodate Jack's extended family and some important colleagues. "Don't worry, you'll still be able to see everything." With that dismissal, I made my way to the ceremony site, where guests were already beginning to arrive. The seating chart confirmed my position far from the front, at a distance from where parents traditionally sat. As I took my assigned seat, I noticed Barbara Harrington, Jack's mother, looking at me with concern from her front row position. She started to stand, perhaps to come speak to me, but was intercepted by Amanda's wedding planner with some urgent matter. The ceremony itself was undeniably beautiful. Amanda was radiant as she walked down the aisle, alone, having declined my offer to escort her in her father's absence. Jack looked handsome and genuinely moved as he watched his bride approach. I wiped tears from my eyes, feeling both pride in my daughter's happiness and an acute awareness of my peripheral role in this milestone event. After the ceremony, guests were directed to a cocktail hour on the terrace, while the wedding party took more photographs. I found myself standing alone, nursing a glass of champagne, watching interactions between guests who all seemed to know each other. I recognized some faces from the photos Amanda had shared over the years, classmates and sorority sisters who had replaced me as her confidants. "You must be Amanda's mother," said a voice beside me. I turned to find an elegant man in his early 60s extending his hand. "I'm Alan Thompson, Jack's boss and mentor." "Ruth Miller," I replied, shaking his hand. "It's nice to meet you." "Jack speaks very highly of Amanda. They make a wonderful couple." "Yes, they do." I agreed, grateful for the simple kindness of conversation. "Jack seems like a fine young man. He's doing well at your company, I understand." "Exceptionally well. He has a bright future ahead of him." Alan studied me with an intensity that seemed unusual for casual wedding small talk. "Have we met before, Ruth? You seem familiar somehow." Before I could respond, the announcement came for guests to make their way to the reception hall. Alan excused himself, and I was once again alone as I found my assigned table for the dinner. As expected, I wasn't seated at the main family table where the Harringtons and wedding party sat. Instead, I found myself at a table far from the center of the room, with distant relatives of Jack and a few of Amanda's former colleagues she hadn't been close enough with to include in her bridal party. From my peripheral position, I watched as Amanda moved confidently through the reception, accepting congratulations and posing for photos with Jack's business associates. She looked every inch the sophisticated bride she had aspired to be, showing no indication that her mother was even present at the celebration she had funded. Throughout the elegant dinner service, I tried to engage with my table mates, making polite conversation about the beautiful venue and ceremony. Most were pleasant enough, but clearly confused about why the mother of the bride would be seated with them rather than at the family table. Amanda and I wanted a non-traditional seating arrangement. I explained protecting my daughter's reputation, even as she diminished mine. "It gives me a chance to meet new people." As the main course was cleared, I noticed Alan Thompson watching me again from his seat near the head table. There was something troubling him, a furrow in his brow as he periodically glanced in my direction while speaking with the guests around him. I wondered briefly what could be causing his apparent confusion, but was distracted by the announcement that speeches would begin. Jack's father spoke first, offering a warm and humorous welcome to Amanda as the newest member of their family. Barbara followed with a touching tribute to the couple's relationship. Then Jack's best man delivered an entertaining account of their friendship through college and beyond. Finally, it was Amanda's turn to speak. She looked flawless as she took the microphone, her confidence evident in every movement. I leaned forward slightly, hoping against hope that amidst her thanks, she might acknowledge the sacrifices that had brought her to this moment. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today," she began with a practiced smile. "Jack and I are so grateful to be surrounded by the people who matter most in our lives." She thanked Jack's parents for their generosity and guidance, acknowledging the beautiful rehearsal dinner they had hosted and the support they had provided throughout the planning process. She thanked her bridesmaids for their friendship, and Jack for being her perfect partner in every way. Then, almost as an afterthought, she turned slightly in my direction. "And of course I should thank my mother for her contribution today." A ripple of polite applause followed, and I smiled appreciatively, relieved to be acknowledged at all. But Amanda wasn't finished. Many of you don't know much about my background. She continued, her tone shifting subtly. I grew up in circumstances quite different from the life Jack and I will build together. My smile froze as I realized what was coming. My mother did her best working as a high school teacher in a district that wasn't exactly known for its academic excellence. Soft laughter rippled through sections of the audience. We lived in a tiny apartment where I shared my bedroom with the laundry machines. Glamorous, right? More laughter, louder this time. I maintained my smile, though it felt increasingly brittle. Mom insisted on making all my clothes herself to save money, which was just fantastic for my social life in middle school. Nothing says popular like homemade jeans with uneven seams. She paused for the resulting chuckles. And our family vacations? Well, those were usually spent visiting the free museums in whatever city was hosting the discount teacher conferences Mum attended. With each anecdote delivered with the timing of a practiced comedian, Amanda stripped away the dignity of the sacrifices I had made for her. Every story was technically true, but twisted to mock rather than honor the life we had shared. She described my second job at the diner as moonlighting as a ketchup bottle refiller, reducing years of exhausting labor to a punchline for her wealthy new social circle. I sat perfectly still, back straight, smile fixed even as I felt a hot flush of humiliation creeping up my neck. Around me, reactions were mixed. Some guests laughed appreciatively at each joke, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the cruelty beneath the humor. Barbara Harrington's face had grown increasingly troubled while William stared down at his plate. Jack looked uncomfortable, but made no move to interrupt his new wife's speech. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Alan Thompson's expression change dramatically as Amanda mentioned my full name in connection with another embarrassing story. He sat up straighter, a look of shock crossing his features as he stared at me with new recognition. So, yes. Amanda was concluding, raising her glass in a mock toast in my direction. Thank you, Mum, for showing me exactly what kind of life I didn't want. Your example pushed me to reach higher, to want better, to become someone who belongs in this world rather than serving it. For that negative inspiration, I'll always be grateful. The room fell into an awkward silence, broken only by scattered, uncertain applause. I maintained my composure, nodding slightly as if acknowledging a genuine compliment rather than a public humiliation. 20 years of putting Amanda first had prepared me for this moment of ultimate sacrifice, protecting her from the consequences of her own cruelty by refusing to make a scene at her wedding. As the uncomfortable applause faded, I saw Alan Thompson rise abruptly from his seat, his face set with determination. He whispered something to the wedding planner, who looked startled, but quickly brought him a microphone. The unexpected movement drew all eyes away from me, providing a momentary respite from the weight of 200 pitying gazes. "Excuse me," Alan said, his authoritative voice immediately commanding attention. "I know this isn't on the program, but I feel compelled to say something." Amanda looked annoyed at the interruption to her moment, while Jack appeared confused by his boss's unexpected intervention. I simply sat still, unsure what could possibly follow the public dismantling of my life's work and worth. Alan Thompson stepped to the center of the room, looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Whatever was coming, I steeled myself to face it with the same dignity I had maintained throughout this difficult day. The reception hall fell completely silent as Alan Thompson stood with the microphone and unscheduled speaker commanding unexpected attention. Amanda's face showed clear annoyance at having her moment interrupted, while curious murmurs rippled through the crowd of guests. "I apologize for the impromptu speech." Alan began, his voice steady and authoritative. "I don't typically speak at the weddings of my employees, but something extraordinary has happened today that I simply cannot let pass unacknowledged." He turned to look directly at me, and I felt my heart rate quicken under his intense gaze. When I first arrived at this beautiful wedding, I thought the name Ruth Miller sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then, during the bride's speech, when she mentioned Westridge High School in Connecticut, something clicked. I frowned slightly, searching my memory. Westridge High was indeed where I had taught for 15 years, but I couldn't recall ever meeting Alan Thompson there. 38 years ago, Alan continued, I was a troubled 14-year-old boy from the poorest neighborhood in town. My father was in prison. My mother worked 3 jobs, and I was well on my way to following in my father's footsteps. I was angry, defiant, and failing every class, except one English literature taught by a young teacher named Ruth Miller. Gasps of surprise echoed around the room. I stared at Alan in disbelief. Memories beginning to stir. There had been so many students over the years. Ms. Miller, as I knew her, then saw something in me that no one else bothered to look for. When I couldn't afford the books for class, she bought them with her own money. When I got into fights after school, she stayed late to give me detention herself, rather than reporting me to the principal, who would have had me expelled. The details sparked recognition. I suddenly remembered a lanky, defensive boy with intelligent eyes and a permanent scowl always sitting in the back row. Alan Thompson, of course. But he had gone by Alan Jenkins back then. One day she handed back our essays on Great Expectations. Mine was filled with more red ink than original text. I was ready to storm out when she asked me to stay after class. Instead of lecturing me, she said something I've never forgotten. You're not writing poorly because you can't do better. You're writing poorly because you're afraid to show how good you could be. Tears sprang to my eyes at the memory. It had been one of those rare teaching moments when you feel you've truly connected with a student in need. Ms. Miller spent her lunch breaks working with me on my writing. She recommended books that spoke to my situation. She attended my basketball games when my own mother couldn't get time off work. And when a college recruiter came looking for athletes, she advocated for me so strongly that I got a chance most kids from my neighborhood never received. By now, the entire reception hall was captivated. I noticed Jack staring at me with new respect, while Amanda's expression had transformed from annoyance to confusion. What many people here don't know, Alan continued, is that before teaching high school, Ruth Miller was a brilliant doctoral candidate at Columbia University, on track for a prestigious academic career. She was publishing groundbreaking literary analysis in scholarly journals and had been offered a tenure-track position that most academics would kill for. Murmurs of surprise swept through the audience. I felt exposed as the life I might have had was suddenly illuminated for all to see. But Ruth gave all that up when her husband abandoned her and their young daughter. She took a teaching job at a public high school instead, with longer hours and a fraction of the salary, because it offered better health insurance and a more stable environment for raising her child alone. Alan looked directly at Amanda now, whose face had grown pale. Your mother, Amanda, wasn't just a teacher. She was offered a position as the youngest female department chair in Columbia's history. She turned it down to raise you. The clothes she sewed for you. That was after she sold her rare book collection to pay for your orthodontia. Those discount teacher conferences funded your summer camps because the registration fees were waived for presenters, which she became specifically to give you those opportunities. Amanda's eyes widened in shock. This was information I had deliberately kept from her, never wanting her to feel like a burden or to know the extent of what had been sacrificed. I know these things, Alan said, his voice softening, because 10 years ago, I went looking for the teacher who changed my life. I wanted to thank her properly for the intervention that set me on a completely different path. But Ruth Miller had left Westridge High, and no one seemed to know where she had gone. He turned back to me, his expression filled with emotion. What Amanda doesn't realize is that her mother didn't just work as a teacher. Ruth Miller was a legend in our school district. She created an after-hours literacy program that dramatically improved reading scores across the entire county. She won the National Teacher Excellence Award twice, but used the monetary prizes to establish a scholarship fund rather than spending a penny on herself. The room had grown so quiet that the gentle clink of ice in water glasses sounded thunderous. Barbara Harrington was openly crying now, while William had his arm around her shoulders, both looking at me with expressions of profound respect. The most remarkable coincidence of all, Alan continued, is that the company Jack works for, the company I built from nothing, carries the name Jenkins Thompson Partners. Jenkins was my birth name, the name I had when Ruth Miller believed in me enough to change the trajectory of my life. And now, through some extraordinary twist of fate, her daughter has married one of my most promising executives. He raised his glass high, turning to address the entire room. So I would like to propose a toast to Ruth Miller, not just as the mother of the bride, but as the woman whose selfless dedication to her students and her daughter exemplifies the very best of humanity. The woman who changed countless lives, including mine, through quiet sacrifice and unwavering belief in others' potential. 200 guests rose to their feet, glasses raised toward me. The sudden reversal left me breathless, tears streaming freely down my face now. Alan walked over to where I sat and extended his hand. Ruth, would you do me the honor of joining me up front? The woman who made today possible deserves to stand in the spotlight for a moment. In a daze, I accepted his hand and allowed myself to be led to the center of the reception. As we walked, Alan leaned close to whisper, "I've been looking for you for years. I can't believe I found you at my employee's wedding of all places." Standing before the crowd of guests, many of whom were now viewing me through entirely new eyes, I found myself facing the microphone Alan offered. "Thank you, Alan." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm overwhelmed by your kind words and this extraordinary reunion." I paused, gathering my thoughts, acutely aware of Amanda watching me with an expression of shock and dawning horror at what she had done. Teaching has never been just a job to me. It's been my calling and my privilege. Every student who passed through my classroom left a mark on my heart, though clearly I failed to adequately explain to my own daughter the joy I found in my career. I looked directly at Amanda as I continued. As for being a mother, it has been the greatest honor of my life. Every sacrifice was a choice made with love, never with regret. I wanted Amanda to have opportunities. I didn't have to reach for dreams without limitations. Seeing her happiness today makes everything worthwhile. It wasn't entirely true in that moment, but it was the truth I wanted for us, the truth I hoped might still be possible. I refused to use this opportunity for revenge, or to embarrass my daughter the way she had embarrassed me. To Jack and Amanda, I concluded, raising my glass. May your marriage be blessed with understanding, growth, and unconditional love. And may you both always appreciate the value of kindness, which costs nothing but means everything. The applause was genuine this time, thunderous and warm. As I returned to my seat, guests stopped me to shake my hand or offer brief hugs. Barbara Harrington embraced me fully, whispering, "I knew there was more to you than Amanda had shared. I'm honored to be family now." For the remainder of the reception, I found myself surrounded by people eager to speak with me, no longer the isolated figure at the back of the room. Alan Thompson stayed close by, filling in the gaps of his life story after high school, sharing how he had built his financial services company from scratch after college and an MBA. "I use your teaching methods in my corporate training programs," he told me with a grin. "That technique you use to make us really engage with the text by defending opposing viewpoints works brilliantly for developing critical thinking in executives." Throughout it all, I was acutely aware of Amanda watching from a distance, her celebratory mood visibly dampened. Jack approached me briefly to apologize for not knowing the full story, and to express his admiration. Amanda never mentioned any of this, he said, genuine regret in his voice. As the evening drew to a close and guests began to depart, I knew there would be a reckoning with my daughter. The public revelation of truths I had carefully protected her from had changed something fundamental between us. Whether that change would heal or further damage our relationship remained to be seen. What I did know with unexpected certainty was that I would face that conversation with a new sense of my own worth. Alan Thompson's recognition had not just corrected the record for the wedding guests. It had reminded me of the value of the path I had chosen, the lives I had touched, and the strength I had shown in the face of abandonment and hardship. As I prepared to leave, Alan pressed a business card into my hand. "My private number is on the back," he said. "I meant what I said about looking for you. We have a lot of catching up to do, and I have a proposition I think might interest you. Promise you'll call next week." I nodded, tucking the card carefully into my purse, surprised to find myself looking forward to whatever might come next. For the first time in decades, I felt seen for who I truly was, not just as Amanda's mother, or as the provider who had never quite provided enough, but as Ruth Miller, a woman of accomplishment and impact in her own right. When the last guest had departed, and the venue staff began the process of breaking down tables and collecting centerpieces, I found myself alone in a quiet corner of the terrace, gathering my thoughts, before calling a taxi back to my hotel. The emotional whiplash of the day had left me exhausted, but strangely energized, as if some long-dormant part of myself had suddenly awakened. "Mom." I turned to find Amanda standing a few feet away, still in her wedding gown, but with her carefully styled hair now slightly disheveled. Her makeup remained perfect, except for the mascara smudges beneath her eyes that suggested recent tears. "Congratulations again, Amanda," I said evenly. "It was a beautiful wedding." She twisted her hands together, a nervous gesture I remembered from her childhood. "Can we talk somewhere private?" I nodded, following her to a small sitting room adjacent to the bridal suite. The space was cluttered with discarded bouquets and the detritus of pre-ceremony preparations, but it offered the privacy we needed. For several long moments, Amanda stood silently, seemingly unable to find words. I waited patiently, refusing to make this easier for her, a small act of self-respect that felt surprisingly significant. "I don't know what to say," she finally began. "I had no idea about Columbia, about the awards, about any of it." "You never asked," I replied simply. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "Why didn't you tell me? All these years I thought you were just stuck, that teaching was what you had to settle for." "Teaching was never settling, Amanda. It was a deliberate choice and a privilege. As for the rest, would it have mattered? Would knowing I gave up a prestigious position have made you less embarrassed by our apartment or my second job?" Amanda flinched at the direct question. "I was awful to you in that speech. I can't believe I did that." "Yes, you were." I agreed, no longer willing to minimize her actions. "You deliberately humiliated me in front of 200 people, including your new family and husband's colleagues." "I just wanted to seem sophisticated," she whispered. "I wanted them to see how far I've come, how much I belong in their world now. By mocking the foundation that got you there, by treating the sacrifices I made as punchlines." She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mum." 24 hours earlier, I might have rushed to comfort her, to assure her that all was forgiven. The Ruth Miller who had spent decades putting Amanda's feelings before her own would have opened her arms and absorbed this hurt like all the others. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. "I accept your apology, Amanda, but I need you to understand something. Being sorry isn't enough this time. You're not a child anymore. You're a grown woman who made a calculated decision to mock your mother for social advantage. Her eyes widened at my firm tone. I have always loved you unconditionally, I continued. That hasn't changed and won't change. But moving forward, our relationship needs to be built on mutual respect, not just my endless accommodation of your shame about your upbringing. What are you saying? She asked, her voice small. I'm saying that I'll always be your mother, but the terms of our relationship are going to change. I won't be your ATM for emergencies. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not to make your friends comfortable. And I won't accept being treated as an embarrassment to be hidden away. Amanda wiped at her tears. Jack is furious with me. He said he had no idea I felt that way about you or that I was going to say those things. He thinks I've been lying to him about my background. Have you? I asked directly. She nodded miserably. I told him you were an education consultant who traveled a lot. That's why you weren't more involved in the wedding planning. The revelation stung, but no longer surprised me. That's between you and Jack now. Your marriage is beginning with deception, Amanda. I suggest you start fixing that immediately. What about us? She asked. How do I fix this? I took a deep breath. Time and demonstrated change. I need space right now to process everything that's happened, not just today, but over the years. When I'm ready, I'll reach out. But we're family, she protested. You can't just cut me off. I'm not cutting you off. I'm establishing boundaries I should have set long ago. I stood smoothing my expensive dress that no longer seemed like such a waste of money. It had, after all, been part of this watershed moment. Congratulations again on your marriage. I truly wish you and Jack happiness. With that, I left the room. My steps lighter than they had been in years, despite the emotional weight of the confrontation. Outside, I was surprised to find Alan Thompson waiting near the entrance, engaged in conversation with the event coordinator. Ruth, he called when he saw me. I thought you might need a ride back to your hotel. That's very kind, but I was going to call a taxi. Please allow me. We have so much to catch up on, and I'd like to tell you more about that proposition I mentioned earlier. Too tired to refuse, I accepted his offer. In his luxurious car, Alan explained that his company had recently established an educational foundation to provide scholarships and mentoring for underprivileged students. We need a director, he said. Someone who understands both education and disadvantaged students. Someone with administrative experience and a passion for making a difference. The position comes with a substantial salary and complete program autonomy. I listened with growing interest as he outlined a role that seemed tailor-made for my skills and experience. By the time we reached my hotel, I had agreed to visit his offices in 2 weeks to discuss the opportunity in more detail. Whatever you decide about the job, Alan said as he walked me to the lobby, I hope you'll allow me to take you to dinner sometime. Purely to catch up, of course. The slight nervousness in his confident demeanor made me smile. I'd like that, Alan. Very much. Over the next 2 weeks, I focused on rebuilding my sense of self. I declined to answer Amanda's increasingly frequent calls and texts, giving myself the space I had promised. Instead, I researched Alan's company and foundation, considered the job offer, and began to envision a future shaped by my own choices, rather than by my daughter's needs and demands. When I finally met with Alan to discuss the position formally, I accepted on the spot. The work was meaningful, the compensation more than generous, and the opportunity to influence educational policy on a larger scale than ever before was irresistible. There's one more thing, Alan said after we had finalized the details. The foundation needs a public face for fundraising events. Given your background, would you be comfortable with some public speaking engagements? I thought of Amanda's wedding speech, of the vulnerability I had felt being discussed in front of strangers. But I also remembered the strength I had discovered in that moment of exposure. Yes, I said confidently. I think I would enjoy that aspect of the role. 2 weeks after accepting the position, I received a handwritten letter from Amanda. Unlike her texts and voicemails, which had been increasingly demanding and self-centered, the letter showed genuine reflection. "I've been thinking about all the times I took your sacrifices for granted," she wrote. "All the times I was embarrassed by things that should have made me proud. Jack has helped me see how warped my perspective became. I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I hope someday we can build a new relationship based on who we both truly are, not who I pretended we were." It was a start, not a solution, but an opening that might eventually lead to healing. I wrote back with a simple invitation for lunch the following month, a small step toward whatever our future relationship might become. In the meantime, my new life took shape with surprising ease. I sold my small house and moved closer to the Foundation's headquarters, buying a comfortable condo with a view of the park. The work challenged and fulfilled me, allowing me to advocate for educational opportunities on a scale I had never imagined possible. And then there was Alan. Our professional relationship quickly developed alongside a personal connection and based on shared values and experiences. His journey from troubled teen to successful businessman had given him insights and perspectives that complemented my own. Our occasional dinners became regular outings, and I found myself opening up to the possibility of companionship I had long ago stopped considering. 6 months after Amanda's wedding, I met her and Jack for dinner at a neutral restaurant. The conversation was stilted at first, but gradually warmed as we established new patterns of interaction. Amanda seemed genuinely interested in my work at the Foundation, asking thoughtful questions about our programs and impact. "Mr. Thompson speaks so highly of you at the office," Jack told me. "The other executives joke that they can't get his attention when you call." Amanda watched my face carefully. "Are you and Alan just colleagues, Mum? You mentioned having dinner with him a few times in your emails." I smiled, enjoying this small reversal where my daughter was now curious about my personal life. "We're friends. Good friends. Beyond that, we're taking things very slowly." As we said goodbye that evening, Amanda hugged me tentatively. "I miss you, Mum," she whispered. "The real you, not the version of you I made up to fit my narrative." "I miss you too," I replied honestly. "The real you's so much more interesting than the social climber you were pretending to be." She laughed, a genuine sound that reminded me of her childhood. "I'm learning that. Jack helps. He said he fell in love with Amanda Miller, not the fake persona I created." It was a beginning, not a fairy tale ending where all hurts were magically healed, but the start of an honest relationship between two adult women who happened to be mother and daughter. As for me, I discovered that life at 58 could be more authentic and fulfilling than I had ever imagined. The seeds of kindness and dedication I had planted throughout my teaching career had blossomed in unexpected ways, returning to me when I needed them most. Sometimes the universe has a perfect sense of timing, bringing full circle the energy we send out into the world. My greatest professional disappointment had led me to touch lives I would never otherwise have encountered, including the troubled boy who grew into the man who would one day help restore my daughter's perception of my worth. More importantly, that day at Amanda's wedding had forced me to reclaim my own sense of value, to stand firmly in the truth of who I was and what I had accomplished. The daughter I had centered my life around for decades had publicly rejected that life only to discover its hidden richness when illuminated by another's perspective. Have you ever experienced a moment of public humiliation that unexpectedly led to something positive? Or discovered that something you viewed as a sacrifice was seen by others as strength? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that our choices have ripple effects we can't always foresee. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the kindness you send into the world returns exactly when you need it most.